This is Super SaaS Bros with Cory and Jayde. Let's jump in. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Super SaaS Bros. We are your hosts, Jayde and Cory Silva, not brothers, but best friends. And we have no other than Cooper Simson, who is an Ironman, a jewelry man, and now a venture man. Coop, what's up, dude?
How's it going, guys? That's, I think, the best intro I've had. I like that one. I'm going to start using it, but doing great.
I'm like, how do I intro this guy? He's got so much going on. Dude, we're so stoked to have you on the pod. How about I do this? Let's put you in a scenario of you're in the back of an Uber ride, you're going to the corral, and the guy looks at you and he's like, who are you? What do you do? What are you saying?
I think probably the easiest way to say it is I like to do a lot of different things, but right now, kind of the main thing that I'm working on is I'm the portfolio manager for Martell Ventures. So if anybody knows who Dan Martell is, I basically help analyze all our inbound deal flow, all of our opportunity flow, as well as supporting all the portfolio companies that we work with for Dan Martell's AI Venture Studio. So pretty much what I focus on is looking at, this year for some quick numbers, I think we've evaluated just over 3,000 AI companies, spoken with probably at least 350 founders this year so far. So just kind of basically been thrown headfirst. Obviously, Jayde, you and I worked together on our previous AI startup, so been in the AI space for a while, but this year kind of went like full 2 feet deep, head first into just what everybody else is working on. Yeah. So been seeing a lot of things that have been happening in the space and happy to talk and share about it.
Sweet. How has that shift been for you from kind of leaving our startup that we were doing to now kind of diving right into working with Dan and Martell Ventures?
For myself, it's been pretty seamless, more or less. So, I've got a hefty dose of shiny object syndrome, to say the least. So for myself, this position that I'm in has been fantastic because I can kind of quench that thirst just by seeing what everybody else is working on, and I get to see everything else that's going on, and also get to work and directly apply everything that I know and that I'm skilled at to our portfolio company. So I kind of get to have like tastes and dabble in all these different opportunities. So for me, it's been pretty seamless and been a fun time so far. And wouldn't really, at the existing moment, wouldn't really change it for the world.
Yeah, I usually have that shiny object syndrome as well too. I feel like Jayde probably in the same boat as well too. But that's why we love building stuff because it's hard when you start, especially in the AI world. It's ever changing, which is exciting for us, but it definitely kind of quenches that thirst a little bit of shiny object syndrome. But Martell Ventures, tell us a little bit about the mission. You guys are obviously focused on AI focused startups, AI driven startups, but why should people care about Martell Ventures?
Yeah, so the biggest, it's kind of like the mission that we're on right now is obviously we have kind of like the goals that we want to hit, but really the biggest thing that we want to focus on is finding awesome founders who are solving really cool problems and doing it AI first for small and medium-sized businesses. So the area of expertise that we really focus on and where we kind of have a unique insight into is less about the bleeding edge of what people are building, that kind of all like the magic that AI can do. Really, we're trying to take that and just figure out how do actual businesses apply it, and what are the tools and products and solutions that people are creating that can be used right now. Because there's a lot of, and I think why people should care about what we're focused on and doing is there's a lot of noise in the AI space right now. Dude, every week, you guys know, but every week there's a new update that comes out, or there's a new product, there's a new something that comes out. And it's, if you're not careful, it's very easy to get swept up in it. So what we're trying to do is almost be kind of that soundboard for small, medium-sized businesses to say hey, if we're getting involved with this opportunity or this company, there's a high likelihood that it's going to be able to add value to your business directly, and kind of just help cut out some of that noise. So that way, if you are a business and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I actually use AI and how do I wrap my head around all these tools and all this optionality? We can kind of be that soundboard to say hey, this is where you should set your attention and your focus. This is what's actually working right now. if you want to skip all the noise, just come here, kind of reducing that signal to noise ratio for businesses.
Totally. Cool. So like you have the founder, you have the product. How important is it for you when you guys are going in and doing your due diligence on, I guess, both product and the founder? What are some of the red flags you're looking for and the green flags on what would incentivize you guys to come in and partner with that founder or that product? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have like a pretty detailed criteria thing, but the biggest things that I would kind of say is on the product side, the two things that we really look for are, one, is it actually solving a real problem right now? So there's a lot of
And is that just already them finding product market fit and they've already come to you for that?
That's an element of it. I mean, product market fit, everybody has their own definition for where that really would be. I would personally say if a company hasn't gotten to like at least 83K, so a million in ARR is kind of like, or like 83K in MRR is their run rate. Pretty hard to say that you've like actually gotten product market fit. And like that also is like, I would say there's a lot of like key markers that you're going to work yourself up to, but if you don't have a repeatable sales channel that's bringing in customers, all that stuff, so like product market fit, like true product market fit, I'd say we want to see that there's been product validation 100%. So like we want to see that like a product has users. We want to see that they've been able to deliver for those users and that there's some semblance of something tangible there.
Right.
But I'd say the bigger things for us is we want to make sure that the product is actually solving a real problem and it's not just a tool that is using AI just because it can use AI. Like there's a lot of products and solutions out there that are building just because they can build something doesn't necessarily mean it's a fantastic product that solves
it's cool but not valuable.
Exactly. And then I would also say, so like that's kind of number one. Number two, kind of on like the product side, is we kind of have this phrase, or we kind of have this idea of like, does it have a magical experience or does it feel like magic to the end user? And if it doesn't feel like magic, it's just not inherently all that interesting to us right now. And magic, it can be a broad thing. It doesn't have to be this crazy, super technologically difficult thing. It could be just as simple as like, oh, wow, you have, say, like a voice agent, but your onboarding takes 2 minutes because the second that somebody comes in, you can take a minimum amount of information, extrapolate that into a lot of different criteria that essentially just onboards in the background. So a user's set up and ready to go. Like I give you my website, I give you what I'm looking for and a little bit of details, and all of a sudden you're able to scrape my whole website, do all this stuff. Like there's certain things where it's like, whoa, that experience felt really magical because they've tailored the experience on the back end. Right. That's really cool. As opposed to like, not to hate on a bunch of tools that are kind of doing, let's say, full-on wizards, drag and drop, all this stuff, but it's like there's certain things that I kind of look at now and I go like, okay, that's clearly not going to be the user interface going forward. So that's kind of like on the product side what we look for: real problem, magical AI experience. And then more on like the person and kind of like on the founder side, I'd say that's what we're more kind of like interested and focused on, is any one of these, any idea, any business, any product right now, there's a ton of risk in that. The one thing that can help reduce a lot of that is the founder the kind of person who, regardless of what kind of comes through their way, are they going to be successful and are they going to win? And so we're really looking to try and find founders who just kind of have that panache about them where you're like, okay, I'm betting on this person because even if this idea doesn't necessarily pan out, which, I mean, Jayde, you and I know firsthand, great idea, outside market factors that kind of help take it a different direction. I mean, there's stuff that kind of pops up all the time that you're not prepared for, but is the person behind it somebody who's going to win? So we look to evaluate that, and there's a huge kind of like interpersonal assessment from just how have they shown up, do they have a history of winning, are they somebody who has struggled through adversity, are they somebody who's been setting aside like funding and kind of like moonlighting this and got it to a certain point even though they've got other things going on, are they willing to go out? There's a bunch of different stuff. So that's kind of how we look to like really evaluate. And then on top of just like the technical nitty gritties of like our diligence factors, but those are probably, if those boxes aren't met, it's usually a pretty easy, like, okay, we kind of got to look to move on here.
Cool. Would you ever, I'm going to throw an exception case at you.
Yeah.
If you had an amazingly talented, like technical founder, you had like an amazing product. It had that like magical AI experience. So it's kind of hitting those product boxes, but there's no traction, there's no users, and no revenue. Would that be something that Martell Ventures and yourself still consider to move forward with? Like, barring, I know there's like, deeper diligence stuff required, but like a situation like that, would that be something that you guys are interested in?
So we've actually kind of opened up, so to actually kind of help take on more of that opportunity, we've opened up like kind of two channels in ventures. We've kind of got like partnerships, which is what I predominantly focus on. So that's companies that are at a certain threshold of kind of like validation. They're basically ready to go, so we can kind of step and run our playbooks and help them grow. That's kind of like the partnership side of things. Then we've got what we've kind of opened up, which is kind of like the co-creation or incubate side of things, where it's if there isn't that validation, we need to kind of work with that founder to kind of say, hey, how can we go get all that validation? How can we advance this product to a point where we can just essentially make it almost inevitable that we will win, or we can figure out if it's not something that's going to win and we can just move on from it faster. We have kind of like a co-create side of things. The rules of engagement on that look a little bit different just in terms of how we structure the deals, but it's definitely something that we're open to, and it's definitely something that we are currently building out capacity for, to make sure that we can take awesome people who want to solve cool problems and still kind of find ways to be successful with them.
Super cool. So you got like the incubation side, right? And you got the partnership side, right? It sounds like you have a lot of criteria on the partnership side. The incubation side, in your head, and when you guys are kind of trying to figure out, if we were to kind of build out a matrix on like what are kind of cool products, what are actually solving real problems, and then you guys are kind of like trying to fill in the gaps here. Are you guys, dialed into specific industries on what you guys want to incubate? How do you guys kind of approach that? What is the notion around that?
Yeah, so the easiest one for us that's kind of like a catch-all is kind of back to one of our like biggest core values is simplicity or simple scales. So for us, we always like to try and not complicate it too much. So the biggest thing is, does it solve a solution for an SMB? And so really what that just boils down to is there's a lot of reasoning behind it, but it's just that's the domain of expertise that everybody on the team kind of has. And it's also just from a unit economics perspective, what kind of makes the most sense. So at a bare minimum, that kind of has to be there. So does it solve a problem for a small to medium-sized business? And also one that I would say is it not too hyper specific? So like we've come across a couple opportunities that awesome founders building a really cool solution, but it's for a really specific narrow niche. And it's like, that might just be it's just a little bit too tricky, because now instead of being able to broadcast and kind of use the value drivers that we have, which is kind of like Dan, as well as like the network authority, as well as the expertise in building and scaling these companies, the more narrow and niche you go, the harder and harder it kind of gets to build a very broad strategy for that. So now, as an example, like if someone's building a solution for like, say, the home services industry, cool, very easy to work on. Now, if someone was building a solution that was hyper specifically just tailored for, let's say, pest removal, and they only service pest removal companies, it might be like, okay, now we're starting to just like narrow that niche down a little bit too much. It's like, can we go a little bit more broad with that market? So really the biggest thing for us is we want to just make sure that the opportunity size is big enough, and we're not just pigeonholing ourselves too specifically into something. Like there's been a couple opportunities, again, if someone was like, hey, I've got this tool, but it's only specifically for transnational like oil and gas trucking companies. All right, cool. Well, that's the strategy to acquire those customers is a lot different than just like it becomes like anything that has to just go like kind of straight to door knocking in terms of sales, or like hyper like specific kind of relationship based sales. We'll look to try and kind of stay away from. But if there's ways that we can add value to markets on a slightly larger scale, those are kind of like the number one things that we're really going to look at and consider, because we know we can add a lot of value there.
Is there anything you just won't touch, like an industry or something like that you just like, nope, like we've seen a couple of them, we're just like, that's a hard no matter what, because it just doesn't fit?
There's a few. Anything that sells to governments, kind of for that exact reason.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Wow. It's just like, one, we don't know, like, we don't necessarily have the expertise of selling to governments,
right?
And it's the sales cycle is just really long. You just don't have a ton of customers. I mean, all the power to the people that want to go sell to those industries. It's just not our domain of expertise. I would also say in the same vein, anything that's like very B2C. So if it's a tool that's like a $5 a month subscription that you need 50,000 users for the unit economics to work, super cool for the people that are able to make those work, not necessarily our domain of expertise. And then probably the other one that I would say is kind of like similar on there is anything that has like a high platform risk dependency is kind of another one. So like if we're looking at if we're evaluating a business and let's say their entire business model is hedged on the back of another software or another tool or another organization, it just adds that level of risk where like you're kind of an API call away from, or you're an API change away from not having a business. So
dude, I'm so interested in this because I'm finding like, and I'm so curious of your thoughts, because what we're finding here is like a lot of businesses are either tightly coupled to OpenAI or like Gemini or like, right? And then my thoughts, like there was this huge outage that happened, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and like everything was down, Cursor was down, and you start to think like all these services, like where is that single source of truth that they're all kind of using? And if that goes down, all these startups go down. So, but then there's the other side of it where it's like people are trying to get market quick now, right? Like there's a lot of like these now, I'll call them like software influencers, and this like new like world and these buzzwords around like shipping fast and getting your product to market as quick as possible. And it's really cool because on the developer side, right, if you don't have the sales and marketing skills, right, it's almost like, how do I help you integrate and learn about these sales and marketing skills to get to market quick, right? But then on the flip side, it's kind of like, okay, well, you got to market quick, right? The product's there, but then you got to market quick because you're tightly integrated to all these little APIs, or you used a Lovable or a Base 44, right? So when you guys go in, you guys are kind of doing your due diligence. Is this something that you're like, when you do the technical reviews, is this something is like a red flag to you guys? You're like, we can't even touch this because if this goes down, it's a no bueno.
It's less on that side that we're concerned about. So for what it's worth, like our whole process is very much based on kind of like ship fast, like get market validation as quickly as possible. And I think right now, especially with the ease in which you can kind of develop and build product now, you kind of have to do that first, which is go sell the thing, figure out if people want it, and then invest further on development to kind of build it a little bit more structurally sound. So we're less concerned about that. Where we're more concerned with is let's say you're a company that is fully dependent on, well, I was actually listening to another podcast the other day, and there was a guy talking about like his first company was very heavily built on like the Gmail ecosystem. Let's say you've got a product that's heavily dependent on Gmail as a provider. So you've got like an email tool or something. And like in this scenario, the guy was saying that like, we basically were a kind of a Chrome extension that happened to go on top, but we used all of like their kind of like HTML markers and CSS markers to fit they kind of hacked it together.
Sure.
For them though, they were like, anytime Gmail decided to change their UI, it completely broke our entire product. That's what we're more concerned with. And there's a couple tools, like I've seen a few people that are very, very, very integrated with, let's say, a Go high level ecosystem, or they're very heavily integrated with just some of these other like larger tools. And the fear there that we have is, okay, well, if the company, or like say a big one that a lot of people have some experience with, is if you were building a tool specifically designed to integrate in with Shopify is kind of notorious for figuring out what people are doing and then being like, oh, that'd be a fantastic feature. Thank you for letting us know.
Correct.
And it's like, that's a risk that we kind of want to avoid more or less, is if people are building tools that use other systems or other ecosystems as kind of like their core, almost like their own database or kind of
infrastructure.
Their own infrastructure. That's more so what we're concerned about, because I would way rather a founder goes ship something really fast. It's not perfect from a technical perspective, but at least it's working and they've gotten validation and they've gotten some semblance of traction, to then be like, cool, if we can just get revenues, or if we can get enough of a boost to get to this level where we can go bring on more development horsepower, or we can can focus now to say, cool, this works. Let's go invest now and kind of build everything out a little bit more solid. That to me makes a lot of sense. But what doesn't make a lot of sense is, hey, yeah, our entire business is dependent on this one API with this other system. And if they decide to change said API, we are kind of screwed. So that's more so what we're kind of like.
Yeah.
To answer your initial question, Corey, that's what we're really like. Yeah, we'll stay away from that because that kind of scares us.
Like, so we're talking about dependency on you know other softwares, stuff like that. What we've seen a ton of as well too is like when the big labs, right, like OpenAI and all of them, they're bringing it like. So OpenAI, I think ChatGPT 5 is coming out in August. It's kind of like what they're earmarking right now. Yeah. Every time a new big model update is coming down, like sometimes it washes up a ton of like startups, right? Yeah. Because they were like, well, this was like our main, you know, maybe our one major feature, and now they're offering it like, you know, to pretty much all their users, and they have such a huge network. How are you guys like dealing with that? With maybe with some of your, I guess, your portcos and stuff like that, or founders that are coming into the network and stuff?
Well, I mean, this isn't what this wasn't the reason why Jayde and I's previous business went under, but like we had a beautifully orchestrated structure of a whole bunch of wonderfully architected prompts that essentially created our own chain of thought. Boy, oh boy, chain of thought came. Now, I still think what we had built would have still been valuable now because people don't know how to properly. Like, there's a lot of chain of thought built into that product. Yeah. And like no general person's coming off the street and figuring that out in their own project files. So I think there's still like some safety that's built in for companies. Now, what I do think what we really look at is a couple things. It's kind of like, have you guys ever heard the story of Google's kind of like dead projects, or kind of like their okay, so I forget. I've heard this in a couple different podcasts or a few different places, but basically what would happen is Google has kind of like their ideas labs within like each one of their departments, like whether it's Maps, whether it's Gmail, whether it's whatever. Yep. And they'll spin up new features that literally become, in their own right, 50 million, like so in some instances, like $50 million businesses that they'll just put on pause. And they're like, nope, we're not going to pursue it. We're not going to spin it out. We're just going to let it go to the side because it's a distraction from like the larger target that they kind of have set. And I can't imagine what that number is of where it's like, hey, let's integrate this into the larger product as a whole and turn it into like a core feature. But there's some number at like every one of these organizations where they're looking at and going, is this opportunity big enough for us to directly go after and compete with? So as an example, I have a hot take on GPT-5, but I would not be surprised if Lovable is essentially now a ChatGPT core feature. Like if OpenAI is not going to roll out with their own, hey, tell us exactly what you want to build and we'll ship it for you. Like there's no way when Lovable goes and essentially gets whatever valuation they just got.
They raised 200 million or something recently.
Yeah, 1.3 billion was their valuation.
Yeah, 1.3. Mm-hmm. I can guarantee OpenAI is going, we can probably do exactly what they're doing. So yeah, I think if you're directly going after a large swath of users and a large swath of functionality, lots of room to be scared. What we're kind of looking at is, and I mean, this kind of goes back to us. There's a lot of companies that we've seen that are coming out with very kind of like side steps from what ChatGPT features are. So it's kind of like, okay, we allow you to contain your information and output like prompts better. So just like a better way of kind of storing context and memory. Doesn't seem all that defensible. There's other things where we've seen that are kind of just like evolutions of, or kind of like one or two steps ahead of like certain features. Not all that interesting because there's a world where like, why would I go pay $97 a month for you when I can kind of with like a little bit of tweaking get it to happen in Claude or ChatGPT.
Totally.
I think the way that we kind of look at it is it's just back to like, is this a specific problem that's solving for a specific user? And a lot of the times kind of like not thinking of it from an agentic perspective, but thinking of it from, is this one or two extra layers that the average business owner or the average user wouldn't have the capacity to just go figure out how to chain two of these things together? That's kind of where we're seeing some like a little bit of safety. And like also if you're solving a specific use case, the one thing that is really nice is a lot of these larger kind of frontier models or larger GPT companies,
right?
they are not necessarily going to be going after some of those specific shreds of like opportunity. So that's kind of where we're looking. Like, it has to be specific. It has to be one or two layers of complexity enough that it's not just a singular prompt solving it. And that's kind of how we're looking at evaluating it at the most part. It's hard though. Like, I'll be totally honest. Like, I fully in 2 years, who the heck knows? But at least for right now, that's kind of the working thesis and theory that we got going on about it.
Dude, it's so funny because I know you're a big fan of the podcast My First Million, and they literally say, the 2010s were all just like, they call them SaaS, but really they're just like MySQL database wrappers. And then they came out and they're like, now you have all these new AI products, but really they're just like ChatGPT wrappers. And it's like, so now when you start building all these new products that are just like coupled to OpenAI's API, right?
Yeah.
How quickly, especially like 2 years ago when custom GPTs came out, right?
Yeah.
Tons of businesses were just like freaking out and scared and went under because that was their whole, like, that was their value proposition.
Yeah.
That was what was proprietary about them. And now we're in this world where it's like, now you have MCPs that are coming out and people are using that to integrate to different data sources and systems. And I'm thinking, okay, so I completely agree, because now it's like, it's the channel on which we're communicating with data, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's through this like new protocol or whatever. So with some of these companies that you are kind of looking for, right? And we're just talking about how, we want to make sure that they're not going to be disrupted by maybe GPT-5 comes out and kind of just creates a new feature and wipes them out. Is there something in specific that you guys are like, there is no way that like GPT-5 or any of these guys are going to come out and do this because it'd be a waste of their time, or actually the value proposition isn't even the AI part, it's actually the workflow part, the user flow. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's the one thing that I really look at is how can you get a system. We'll use an example. So we don't have, if anybody's listening has or is building something in this space, please reach out because I'd love to chat to them. But anything that's kind of, say, in the financial realm, as an example. So we'll use the example of somebody, let's say you're building a CFO tool, right? So you tie in all your sources, you could basically get to interact and interface with all your financial data with a couple clicks of a button. There's a world where, sure, you can connect your QuickBooks or your Xero or like other things as an MCP into whatever LLM or GPT you want to, and you can build some semblance of that tool. And you could probably even go as far as to building your own context library, or if you really wanted to get deep into it, build your own kind of like RAG library of kind of like GAAP or all these different like accounting practices and all that. Like, no one's stopping someone from doing that. But I think it's the same way, like, as new technology comes out, like, anybody can kind of go build anything for a self-serve use case. It's just the convenience factor. And I think if you truly wanted to build a tool that kind of did almost act like a financial CFO in your back pocket directly off your data, you could. But where the real, I think, moat comes in, or where the safety comes in, is can you take as much can you basically build up your own vertical source of data that you are essentially aggregating across multiple different users, figure out what are the specific workflows, what are the specific actual instances, what are the actual knowledge libraries that make the most sense for a user, so that way when I come in, everything is just out of the box ready to go, and I don't have to double check, I don't have to think. It's just like, cool, I know that when I tie my sources in here, or if I upload my spreadsheets, or if I do whatever I do, it knows all of the rules of every kind of like jurisdiction, every kind of region that I'm operating out of. I don't have to think if I'm pulling old data or pulling new one. It just works. There's stuff like that where I think it's, if you can get kind of like a data advantage where, sure, ChatGPT will have it, but we are so specific and so dialed in this one area that there's no way they're going to have the same specificity of data on that topic. I think that's kind of the safety. And then also in the workflows, like there's going to be certain agentic workflows or certain like kind of operational workflows that get built out. If you just build the specific ones for a very unique task, like it's going to work better than anything that somebody can self-serve build. And sure, they can go do it, but it's not going to be as good as the out-the-box one if you can specialize hardcore on it.
How do you deal with, as you were talking, you mentioned like accounting and financial. And I was like, we've talked to a few people in this space, and I started thinking about adoption and the friction with adoption. How are you guys like seeing like adoption with some of the companies that you're working with, that you're partnering with? Because that always seems to be a big thing. Like in the accounting space, I think it was Bench Accounting out in Vancouver. Like they were completely AI driven for doing like bookkeeping essentially. But then they basically went under and got bought out by like someone in the US. I forget who now. But because they were hitting all the principles for like accounting principles required to essentially. But like when they dove into like people, like clients' books, it was like an absolute mess. Like they could not make any sense of it because even though it hit the principles, it wasn't doing what the clients needed to do. And so they ended up just losing a lot of users, and they basically tanked pretty hard. So now I hear a lot of people, they see situations like that and they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ever going to bring this to my business. Like I think we talked to an accounting firm that was just like very hesitant to like bring it in. How are you guys dealing with adoption?
I mean, kind of the same way that everybody else is dealing with it. I think it comes with education first. So, I mean, we are lucky because we have a very large ace up our sleeve in Dan that has a pretty large platform. So we can help drive narrative for the certain portfolio companies that we have to showcase. Okay, so like for one of our portfolio companies, Atlas, they use voice agents to basically manage speed to lead for all of their customers. So like as a new lead comes in, they basically ping them right away, manage that whole process. And instead of having, if you've ever run ads for leads before, you'll know maybe you get 10 to 15% of them complete your form and book a call. So, and then you're going to have a 60% show rate on that. So you're only talking to, let's say, 5 to 6 of the 100 leads that you actually engaged with. They basically engage with 100% of the leads and turn that from 5% up to whatever. We can put out content that educates people on how this works and why it's valuable. So that way there's a level of trust or like that knowledge gap gets crossed. But I think overall, I mean, I think the one thing that we kind of stand by is this is happening one way or another. And the companies that we're seeing make it very easy for businesses or for companies to get on and don't try and do too much. So it's how can you kind of manage that user experience to just, again, kind of back to that magic experiences thing. Instead of saying like, cool, we're going to do absolutely everything and AI is going to clean up all your books. It's like, how can you kind of start with like a first principle? Like, what's the first thing we need to be able to do? So is that basically just figuring out tax remittances? Who knows? Or is it, how can we figure out from like maybe a CFO perspective, how can we basically just provide monthly reports on key data that you're looking for? Like there's small kind of like low hanging fruit tasks that you can kind of get people in with and onboard them, get them using it, that don't feel too far away from what they're currently already used to doing. And you can kind of almost Trojan horse them and kind of build them up slowly over time without kind of just being like, cool, integrate everything, now it's off to the races. Like I think we're still a ways from people fully trusting all these tools to do that, but if you can baby stepped in there, it works a lot better. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, that's what I was actually just about to ask you, because even in the legal space, what we're finding, the adoption to AI in that realm is just super tough, because a lot of these guys are like, well, you're dealing with my own proprietary data. I don't want it to be trained, or I don't want to train these GPTs, right? So the adoption to AI in that regard is super slow. The financial sector, the legal sector. So I'm super curious. I'm like, how do you approach this? And I think like creating content, right, and trying to create that trust and transparency, building a brand around it, to help people understand that there is a lot of safety and insurance around what we're building, right? Testimonials, whatever we can possibly do. But I'm always trying to like come back to when people are trying to find value and like hopefully, either increase their revenue, save their costs, or like really just eliminate a headache. Providing that value with AI is just not enough, right? And a lot of it is just on the trust and transparency side. So it's interesting to see that you guys are seeing that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing is you can build anything right now. I mean, like that's the cool part. I mean, we've got one developer out here who's basically doing the same work of like 5 people 3 years ago.
So you can,
like, So like you can, and so I think you kind of have to almost take a step back. Like, really, the skill that you need is how can you properly figure out, okay, again, start with the problem, figure out what is it that I'm actually solving. You really have to think about what's the actual user experience that's going to be the most valuable here, because I also think user experience is changing. Like, for the most part, I don't know about you guys, but I'm doing voice for literally everything, and I've been like screaming at people for the last while. Like I barely type anymore. Like hot take, I think typing is gonna be dead in like 5 years, or not dead, but it's gonna be a lot.
I have that same take. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's that hot. Like I've heard a couple other people online talk about it as well, but it's a good thing I have like a little office because I just literally look like a crazy person talking to my computer 24/7. But you have to think of like, yeah, problem. What's the user experience, and then how can you make it feel not too many steps ahead? Like it's essentially how can you reduce steps that are currently happening right now? Like I always think onboarding is the best way of kind of describing this. So if you have an onboarding process, typically right now there's two ways of doing it. You got self-serve, which is going to be some sort of like guided walkthrough or wizard that's going to basically walk someone through how to start a product. Everyone's kind of used to that already, but nobody likes doing it. Or the other option is you have an onboarding call and somebody basically does the same thing, but just walks it through and kind of does it for a person. I think there is a world where how you can kind of get these tools and these products to kind of integrate people more is copy the same system, but just use AI to make it a lot more clean. So like we've seen a couple companies where their entire onboarding process is either what's the least amount of information we need to go take action on the back end to perform the tasks we need to do, or it's quite simply just a voice interaction where it goes, cool, tell me about like we have no affiliation with this company, but if anybody wants to try a cool demo, it's called Bordy. So basically what Bordy does is you literally just call it, you have a 10-minute conversation where it asks you all the questions to get all the context it needs, and then it just goes and finds people that can help connect you to achieve the outcomes that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's so cool.
It's so cool, and it kind of feels like magic, but it's kind of back to this whole experience. Like, I don't really care that it's like all AI on the background, and I don't really need to know that black box of how it's taking my information and figuring out what it needs to do. All I know is that the outcome at the other end of me giving it that information got me to the outcome I wanted for. So like for a lot of these tools, if you're thinking about, okay, what's the best user experience? Well, how can we just interact with the tools better or these systems better, get them to get the information they need and then go take the task. So I'm still doing the same thing. Like I'm still doing an onboarding process that I'm used to. So it doesn't feel super, I'm not just clicking a button and then having stuff appear out of nowhere. And it's like, whoa, okay, how did that happen? And it's kind of feels like too big of a step. It's like, I'm still doing the thing.
Right.
AI is just making it a lot more efficient, and it's also making it a lot more seamless. That's kind of the way I like to think about it, is how can you do the same thing but just use AI to enhance the task at hand as opposed to completely replace it, because I think we're still a little ways away from there where AI is going to completely replace everything.
Yeah, and I was even thinking as you were talking, I was like, well, what if it, instead of just a pure voice interaction, what if you still did an onboarding call, but it was just an avatar that was doing it, right? And taking you through the same process and can like kind of shoot the shit with you as well at the same time, like still, because maybe people still enjoy that level of onboarding, right? That white glove service, depending on like the product itself, right? So that could be a way to go as well too. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean the voice agents are getting good enough. I mean, holy smokes, they're getting really freaking good. I originally thought we were probably like still about like 6 to 8 months away, and I think we're like probably 3 to 4 months away from it being like pretty indistinguishable.
It's getting so good, and I just came across this one company today actually. They're YC backed, and they basically do load testing for voice agents. So they have a whole test suite of these voice agents that are basically just dumped on a business's voice agent. It runs through a bunch of different scenarios, and then it gives that user feedback, the business feedback on how their voice agent did.
Cool.
Yeah, they're super cool. Yeah, are you seeing right now, Coop, in your day-to-day any like new possible like blue ocean strategies that are appearing that just wouldn't have existed 3-5 years ago?
Oh yeah, I mean probably the easiest one that I've seen, and this isn't really like, I'd say it's blue ocean because there's a whole suite of things that just weren't feasible from like a financial perspective. Like they were always possible, it's just you would never go through the hassle of doing it. But essentially pretty much like productized services are like huge right now, from what I've noticed. Like a lot of people that come to us, like there's a recurring theme where some of the best opportunities will be someone that says, hey, I was actually doing this, making a lot of money as a service, as like a managed service or an agency. Now I've basically just taken the entire workflow that I used to have 5 employees for and used to be like a 15-hour process, and I've essentially just woven together automations and agents to get that same output. there's so many of these like hyper manual, quite literally like just tedious tasks that if you didn't have reasoning involved in the equation, you couldn't do it before, because you're taking data from like multiple different input sources. There's no like direct lineup in terms of how you would match that to an outcome, but with reasoning you can now. And I think that's like one of the biggest blue oceans, which is there's a lot of these services that you can now productize that before it never made sense to productize from a software perspective, because it would have just been way too complicated. But you can do that now. So that's like one of the biggest ones, as well as and I don't want this to sound like mean or vicious, but a lot of middlemen are kind of ripe for disruption is another big one. So there's a lot of kind of roles within organizations, or just jobs.
What would be an example?
Again, we don't have a horse. Well, actually, we kind of do have a little bit of a horse in this race that we're incubating ourselves right now. But like recruitment, as an example. So usually you would have to kind of go through. If you wanted to recruit, there's a couple middlemen that stand in the way there. It's like you've either got something like an Indeed, or you've got like a recruiter that you're working with. There's like, we'll use like a recruiter, or we'll maybe say like a hiring manager is kind of sitting in between that. And there's a bottleneck that forms because one person can't feasibly evaluate 3,000 applicants in some cases for these businesses. Therefore, you can use AI, where instead of having to have a whole team that's just responsible for evaluating new candidates, you can get through it a lot faster. And I think there's a lot of these where if you start looking at different industries or organizations, you start to really see like, oh, okay, information comes in, bottlenecks real hard at one role that's usually like kind of, I'll call it like a middleman position, where they kind of sit in between the input and the output. Like they just basically need to give their stamp on it. And there's a lot of those out there that we've kind of been seeing. Lots in the realty space, lots in kind of like anything that kind of has like broker attached to it is kind of...
Yeah, any broker. Exactly.
Like a broker is kind of one of those things where it's just like, there is a world and there is a way where that task is at least augmented in a very efficient way through the use of AI that didn't make a lot of sense to augment beforehand. So a lot of that is, I would say, kind of like blue ocean. I mean, people are just productizing every single service under the sun. And some of the best opportunities that we've seen are ones where people be like, hey, I was doing this, I was doing X, Y, Z, and now I've kind of productized it. So let's rock and roll. And the beautiful part of it is, if you have an agency or if you have a managed service business and it is like manual and repetitive, and you've got people that are kind of doing more or less like stamp out tasks, you probably can find a way to now build a SaaS solution around that, or like an AI solution around that. And the beautiful part is you've already validated it, because if people are willing to pay you for the service, they're probably willing to pay you for the product.
And you don't need to be a developer to do so too.
Exactly. And you don't really need the developer to do it. So I think that's like one of the biggest things that I've been noticing right now is people who are doing smart things can productize it and sell it. And it's pretty, that's what I would say. It's not like a specific blue ocean, but there's a lot of blue ocean within that kind of framework of thinking in terms of like how you can kind of find some opportunities.
I see that so much with just like marketing and lead gen agencies. I think the most, like you see a ton, like they have like whatever service and offer that they have, and then like, but now they just expand it. I've seen some of them like just like have their productized like version of their service, and then they still have their actual service itself. They've used it as a way to like leverage a higher price on their service, right? But that the product is just the entry point. And basically, if they still want, this like white glove offer, crazy. It's a good way to do it. So with like companies like you said, I think Atlas is one of the kind of the portfolio companies as well too. Do you see like maybe like what's one specific like kind of trait that you've seen across like some of your winners in your portcos that either from the founder or the product itself, maybe it's a mix of both, maybe that like is a little bit underrated?
One of the things that's underrated is, well, I mean, this is one thing that so with all our portfolio companies, we've gotten like really niche down into like, before we start going like big and broad and kind of getting ready for prime time, it is like just nail down like hyper specific it really just comes down to like exactly what are you solving. And I think like that's the hardest thing for a lot of businesses and for a lot of founders to fully contextualize, because in our own heads, whatever we're building, yes, like solves the problem. It's super awesome. It's really cool. But it's like really kind of taking that step back and saying like, okay, well, does a customer actually care about this? And I think probably the underlying benchmark of success for kind of like all the companies that we're evaluating right now are just getting to that level of clarity as quickly as possible. And the ones that get there go up. The ones that don't get there, you start getting into this like, oh wow, everyone's saying there's a lot of extra competition or there's all this other stuff. It's like, okay, well, we haven't clearly defined what that problem is, and it's just getting there as quickly as possible is kind of like the number one trait. So for anyone who's building anything, that's probably the biggest thing I'd say is just before you start banging your head against the wall wondering why it's not working, is just go talk to legitimately 50 people and figure out the exact problem and then go from there. Because at the end of the day, you can again, it's easier than ever to build anything. It's easier than ever to kind of like ship something right now. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. And it's like, go find something, go get validation first, then rock and roll from there.
Yeah, I love that. That'll really help with all the clarity. Sweet, man. Cool. Kind of just to wrap things up here. Last little question for you.
Yeah.
And I know Corey's super passionate about this question too. More of an open question. If today was your last day with one insight from life or business, what would you leave the world with?
Ooh. I would probably say it would probably just be like say yes to more things. I feel like there's with like the one caveat of don't say yes to everything. If it's something that you don't want to do, obviously don't say yes to it. But I think there's a lot of I literally actually have a folder in my phone that's just kind of like what I always call like just like the magic moments that have happened. So it's like things that tend to work out where like when you're in the moment it feels horrible, but then you look back at it 2 months later and you're like, oh, actually that kind of worked out for the better at the end of the day. And it's like sometimes the hardest things that are happening end up, you look back and you're like, oh, okay, that kind of worked out for the better. But a lot of the times you can't get those experiences and you can't get those moments unless you've said yes to something. Like you usually don't get to that end goal by saying no to something. I like the perfect example, like me being in the situation I'm here right now was literally me deciding to say yes to a friend that invited me to a random crypto event 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And it was like that kind of sparked off. That's where like I first heard about the Founders Hike in Kelowna. At that Founders Hike, that's when I met Dan for the first time. That's where we became friends. We started like, then it was an invitation to go for a bike ride. Say yes to go for a bike ride. Then like ba-dang, da-dang, da-dang, da-dang. Like you just gotta start like working back the situation of where you are now, and it's because you said yes to the things and opportunities that presented them. Yeah. There's also a lot of no's you said no to at the same time, but like I think the biggest thing is you can't really move forward unless you say yes to something. So make sure you just say yes to more things and be open to the opportunities that come your way. Probably be the biggest one that I would have to impart.
I love that. Yeah, kind of like say yes, do it afraid, like what if, why not you type of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. Cool, man. Anything you want to leave the viewers with, the listeners with, any plugs you want to do before we kind of wrap up here?
I guess kind of like the main plug that I would kind of have is if anybody is building any super dope software that's solving problems for small and medium-sized businesses, hit me up. Either shoot me a message on Instagram or send me an email. I'm sure we'll post that somewhere.
Yeah.
But just get in touch. Would love to kind of have a conversation, see if there's a fit to work together in that capacity. And yeah, if you're building something, just go do it, but get that validation first, because otherwise you'll spend a lot of time going down a path that might not lead to a lot of fun and success. So that would probably just be the biggest one. Get after it. Hit me up if you want to grow and scale, and rock and roll.
Love it, man. Words of wisdom from the everything man, the Ironman, the Jewellery man, the Venture man. Dude, so stoked to have you here. You can find him at Coop_doggydog or at Cooper@danmartell.com. We'll post everything in the podcast below. Thank you guys so much for listening to us. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Comment, leave a rating, review. Don't know what it does, but I think it helps. And we will see you next Friday.
Wicked. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Super SaaS Bros with Corey and Jayde. We'll see you next time.